Hello, everyone, and welcome to NLP and the Coronavirus Live Day 15. Firstly, before we get into our content today, really thank you for all of the feedback that you've been giving me and my guests on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and on Reddit. It really makes a difference to us because it lets us know that what we're doing is useful, it's meaningful to you, and it keeps us doing these every day. So please, even if it's just a little thumbs up, or I've been speaking to people on the phone today, I've been speaking to clients on the phone today, students on the phone today, and all of them have said, thank you so much for doing it. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for giving us that feedback too. And obviously the ones the lives that I do with my guests are a little bit more planned because they've got to be scheduled and those kind of things. Although the one I did with Reese and Louis yesterday was not planned at all. Just on the spur of the moment, we went like, let's go live and let's do why personal development is vital for the economy and for business now and in the future. And again, thank you for the wonderful feedback you gave us with regard to that. But other than that, when I'm on and I come out on a solo, just me, then I don't really have a planned schedule of what I'm going to be covering. I just tune in during the day and trust my gut, trust my now. As far as what is it that people need, what is it that people want at this point in time. And so what I'm going to talk about today is state management, and particularly something in NLP called anchoring. So let me just explain the concept of anchoring first for those of you that are new to NLP, and then why this is important in lockdown, when we're spending significantly more time with other people than probably we ever have. Yeah. So anchoring is this. Anchoring is based on Pavlovian stimulus response patterns. The idea being that neurologically, when we're in an intense state, our neurology scans all of our senses and goes, okay, why are we feeling this way? Why are we in this intense state? And there's no logic or rhyme or reason around this, but it scans, our neurology scans, or unconscious mind, if you want to think of it that way, scans all of our five senses, and it's seeking for something unique, something that's present that isn't normally present. And when it finds that unique thing, it links them together neurologically. So then what we've got from a behavioral psychology point of view, or from a Pavlovian point of view, is a stimulus response pattern. In NLP, we call it an anchor. What we've got a trigger that triggers a specific state, whether that state be a negative state or a positive state. So let me give you some examples of naturally occurring anchors, because as human beings, not only human beings, because animals are the same, we are anchoring machines. We don't need to learn how to anchor. We're doing it all the time. What I want to talk to you about tonight is how we go about managing anchors, particularly anchors that aren't working for us. So here's some examples of naturally occurring anchors. A particular piece of music comes on, and immediately emotion comes up, and maybe it reminds you of a specific person, a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever it may be. Sometimes people call it the hour song phenomena, and that piece of music comes on, that song comes on, and boom, up comes the emotional state, up comes the memories immediately. Or it might be a particular perfume or a particular aftershave that when you smell it, boom, immediately the emotions come up. I mean, I've got one. that's been around for probably well over 50 years. My mum and dad didn't smoke, and nobody was allowed to smoke in the house when I was a kid, when I was a baby. But my two uncles, my Uncle Martin and my Uncle Dave, both smoked. So when they would come around, they would have to go and smoke outside rather than inside. Okay. But then at Christmas, they would go outside and they would smoke cigars rather than cigarettes. And obviously the smell of cigars carries a lot further because there's a stronger smell and all those kind of things. So, there's me. I'm little. But it's Christmas Day, and I'm excited about Christmas. Excited about my presents and all the family being around and all of that kind of thing. I've got that intense emotional state inside of me, and what is different? What's the unique stimulus, if you like, unique trigger? It's the smell of cigar smoke. And, even today, which is probably at least 50 years later, maybe even more than that, the smell of cigar smoke still has me go like, and I get that excited feeling of Christmas. It's been there in my neurology for that length of time. I know sometimes my Auntie Jenny watches these, so you'll know what I'm talking about. My mum watches as well, so my mum will know what I'm talking about with that particular little memory from the past. But equally, it doesn't matter what the state is, whether it's positive or negative, as long as it's intense, it will get anchored to anything that's unique. So, positive anchors, great, fantastic. Keep them. In fact, build them up. But where I want to talk about this evening, or as I say, it's this evening in the UK. It might not be where you're watching it. It could be. It could already be Wednesday morning. It could be Tuesday morning, depending on where you are in the world. If you're in Hawaii or somewhere like that. But what I want to talk about is negative anchors, which is where we're in a negative state, and that negative state gets associated or linked or anchored to a particular trigger. Now, this is why this thing popped into my mind today. Obviously, people are in heightened states of emotion at the moment, and people are in heightened states of negative emotion. We've talked about it already, whether they be anxiety or fear or panic, or natural thing. We're like locked down with loved ones 24 hours a day at the moment. Probably I've never experienced that in my entire life, except maybe when I was a kid. And but there's a lot of negative emotions around. There's a lot of therefore there's a lot of people are in small spaces, and there is opportunity for conflict, and with conflict comes things like anger or being pissed off or being annoyed. Excuse me, but I've got a little bit of a cold today. So what that can do is it can anchor that state of annoyance or pissed off or angry to the person that you're with or the people that you're with, whether it's your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whether it's your kids, whether it's other family members that you might be in isolation with. And what that causes is that person then becomes the trigger for that negative emotion. Now, there is a particular process in NLP called stacking anchors. What we normally do is we stack positive states to a specific trigger. But imagine this. I'm not saying this is. It might explain some of the things that you're experiencing at the moment as we go into. We've been in this for a couple of weeks now. Is when we do a stacked anchor, we go emotion, trigger, emotion, trigger, emotion, trigger, emotion, trigger, emotion, trigger, emotion, trigger, emotion, trigger. So we've got all these different emotions linked to the same trigger. Normally, as I say in NLP, what we do is we stack positive states like motivation, like energized, like feeling powerful, like feeling confident, like feeling motivated, like feeling loved, the feeling of falling down laughing. But what can happen in relationships, particularly in situations like we're going through at the moment, is you might actually inadvertently create a stacked negative anchor in yourself or possibly in other people. So let me give you a kind of like a scenario here. This is a scenario that would be before the lockdown, yeah, and even then it would happen. Certainly, when I was working with couples with the relationship coaching, this would happen a lot. So imagine, you've been out for the day, you've been at work, you've been in your business, and you've had a really bad day, and you feel like crap. And you're on your way home, and you go, okay, I need to shake this off before I get home. I don't want to walk through the front door feeling bad. And you successfully do that. And then you walk through the front door, and your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever you might live with, even though they might not even be trained in NLP, does an absolutely perfect, what I would call, state elicitation. And they say, "How was your day, darling?" And immediately go, "Oh, it was terrible." And all of the feelings of the bad day come up. Whilst you're looking at the person's face, you're hearing the sound of the person's voice, and maybe they're touching you and giving you a hug at the same time. And how many times might that happen over the years of a relationship? And it creates a stacked negative anchor. So then when you see that person's face, when you hear their voice, when you feel their touch, it immediately fires off all of the bad days that you've had since you've been with that person. And because people don't understand anchoring, they go, wow, I've got to get away from this person. When I'm around them, I feel terrible. But it isn't them. It's just them being the trigger to all of those events in the past. So what we have in NLP is a technique to collapse those anchors, which I'm going to share with you over the. I just want to explain at the moment about these things. So you go like, okay, I think I've got a negative anchor to this person, rather than it being that person making you feel bad. Does that make sense? Put a thumbs up in the comments if that makes sense to you. So what I want to talk to you about in this live is really just around managing anchors, okay? Because, are we going to be going into negative states during what's happening at the moment? Yes, we are. Are there going to be people around us all the time, potentially? Yes, there are. So how do we actually manage this anchoring process? Now, is it likely that your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever you're with, flatmate, whatever it may be, housemate, etc., are going to be going in and out of negative emotional states at this point in time? Yes. Whether it be anxiety, whether it be fear, whether it be sadness, whether it be loneliness, or whatever. And some of those emotional states could be quite intense, understandably. I'm hearing about people whose family members and stuff, are dying in isolation in a hospital. Are they going to be feeling sad when you hear that news? Of course, it's a really significant emotional event. Now, are we saying then, therefore, that you're going to say to the person, okay, you're in a negative state, go into another room, get yourself sorted out before I touch you, before I speak to you? No, what our loved ones need at that point in time is a hug, or for you to sit down and talk to them, whatever, give them a glass of wine. That's what they need at that point in time. But what I want you to be aware of is that when somebody's in a negative or unwanted state, like anger, like sadness, like fear, or whatever, and you touch them, I say you give them a hug, you've created an anchor to that negative state to you touching them in that particular position. So this is what I want you to do from a management perspective on anchoring. So when a person that you're around, whether it's your partner, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whether it's your kids, and I want to talk specifically about kids here as well in a moment, is give them a hug. It's what they need. It's what they want. Yep. But remember where you touched them. Where were your hands when you actually held them as you were hugging them? Just remember that. Now, at some point in time afterwards, when they're in a more resourceful state, when they're in a nice positive state, which they will do eventually, then again, when they're feeling good, hug them. But remember to hug them in exactly the same place as you did when they were in the negative or the unwanted state. What that will do is it will collapse the negative anchor that you created when you hugged them when they were feeling bad. Okay? And it collapses it. So therefore, you create a negative anchor, you collapse it. You create a negative anchor, you collapse it. You create a negative anchor, you collapse it. Yeah, and that manages the states. Now, here's a thing with this around kids. You know, I mean, obviously, your kids, then many of them are not used to being cooped up. They're not used to being able to see their friends or go out and play and all those kind of things. They're going to naturally get fractious. They're naturally going to get grumpy. Yeah. And at that point in time, you might want to give them a hug and say they're there if they're upset, etc. And again, exactly the same thing as you would do with adults. Where were your hands when you hugged them? Then, when their states changed, which of course kids change their state way more rapidly in general than as adults do, you give them another hug. But again, remembering to hug them in exactly the same position will collapse the negative anchor that you created before. Now, this is just a theory that I've got. But when I've introduced this to parents, they've gone, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. See, I think like when kids are little, we hug them when they're feeling bad, we hug them when they're feeling good, we hug them when they're feeling bad again, we hug them when they're feeling good, and it just balances the whole thing out, yeah? Keeps it neutral. But then as kids get older, as they go through this thing that I refer to as the very much overrated process of growing up, then we tend to only hug them when they're feeling bad, which stops it being neutralized and starts to create, like I was saying before, that stacked negative anchor. And I've asked parents this, and I've wondered it myself. Could that be why kids go through a phase where they don't want to be hugged by their parents? They go like, "No, let me up, don't touch me," whatever it may be. Could that actually be the reason why? So here's the thing that we've got to do as we're in lockdown and we're in states of heightened anxiety, fear and panic, etc. It's just to be aware of anchoring. We can't avoid it. We're around each other. We're going to get anchored. The thing to do is just to make sure that when you notice, it's awareness, it's education. Okay, I've created a negative anchor now. Then just remember to then create a positive one in the same place. Will level the whole thing out. Now, you've got the theory of that now. That's just about management. And one of the later lives, then what I'll talk about is if you become aware now, just from awareness, I think I've got a negative anchor to this person or this situation or this circumstance or some specific trigger. Then I'm going to talk you through a process to enable you to collapse that and actually neutralize those negative anchors. So there we go. Thank you for joining me. I trust that's useful. Let me know if it is. I'm trusting my gut, trusting my now, just going with like, okay, what do people out there that are watching these lives, what do they need right now to get through this situation? Not only just surviving, but in a really good place. So thank you for joining me wherever you are in the world. Wherever you are in the world, I love you lots. And ahui ho.